Chase Elliott has been suspended for the upcoming race at Gateway for intentionally wrecking Denny Hamlin, and Eric Amarola shuts Bubba Wallace on pit road during the red flag of the Coca-Cola 600. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start talking about body armor. As Adam Stern reported on Monday evening, that body armor won his second race in NASCAR. It's really cool to see the body armor won their second race. The paint scheme looked really awesome. Glad to see that they're continuing to get more involved in NASCAR, and glad to see they're able to win their second race in NASCAR. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about 2024 Indy 500, as the logo has been revealed for the 2024 Indy 500. The logo has pretty much remained the same for the last 5 or 6 years, and honestly, I think the Indy 500 logo needs to be changed up. I get doing the same thing, but it's kind of gotten a lot more boring time and time again, and I feel like a change up is going to be needed going forward if we're going to continue having logos for the Indy 500 going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Joseph Newgarden. As Joseph Newgarden, with him winning the 2023 Indy 500, he would win $3.66 million for the race and out of the $17 million purse. That is the record for both sectors. So Joseph Newgarden won the most money Indy 500 winner has ever won, and a lot of that has due to the size of the crowd that was at the track is one of the reasons why that purse was really high. That's a lot of money for Joseph Newgarden. Huge congratulations to him on winning $3.66 million. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about BillSubmarines.com. As it was announced on Sunday before the green flag drop, the day before the green flag drop for the Coke 600, that BillSubmarines.com will join RFK starting in 2023. They're going to sponsor this team for 10 races in 2023, and they're going to have more of an expanded schedule in 2024, where they're going to have 18 races, which will be split between both Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher. Really glad to see a new company coming into the sport. I think this is really awesome to see, and glad to see that Bill Submarines will be sponsoring RFK drivers in 2023 and also in 2024. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Justin Haley. Now, Justin Haley now holds the record for the most miles completed by a driver in NASCAR in one day. He ran 898.5 miles in one day. Obviously ran the Coca-Cola 600 and also ran the Xfinity Series race and nearly completed all 900 miles, where Justin Haley finished off the lead lap or 1 or 2 laps down. But like I said, that is a record for a driver in the most in a single day in a NASCAR event, with 2 NASCAR events on the same day. It's really awesome to see. Huge congratulations to Justin Haley on having that record now. He should be honored to have that, because it's an incredible record to have, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Benjamin Peterson. As it was announced on Monday that Benjamin Peterson was the 2023 Indy 500 Rookie of the Year. I can't remember where Benjamin Peterson finished, but let's be honest, a lot of the Rookie of the Year contenders, there were 4 of them. A lot of them end up crashing out. A lot of them end up having problems. I think he finished like 18th or 19th. I'm not entirely sure, which is not really good for the rookies, because we've seen a lot of times at least one rookie finish up front. A lot of the rookies this year really struggled. But nonetheless, huge congratulations to Benjamin Peterson. I think it's well deserved. Benjamin Peterson did have a really good month. He did qualify in the Fast 12, which is really impressive. And congratulations to him on winning the Rookie of the Year honors. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about McLaren. As it was announced on Monday morning that McLaren will acquire Andretti Autosport's headquarters in Indianapolis in 2025. McLaren, of course, is going to be expanding their organization, I think maybe from 3 to 4 cars going into 2024. I'm not entirely sure on that, but there's going to be a lot of drivers that are driving for the McLaren team. Obviously, Alex Palou is likely going to be driving for that team. There's rumors and rumors going on that Marcus Ericsson is going to be driving potentially for that team next year. So they got to try to figure out a way to expand their team, potentially expand their team, so they could have a chance to get more cars over there. But it's really interesting that they're going to be buying up the Andretti Autosport shop. It's a very interesting move, but honestly, I don't think it's overall the most dumb move that I've seen from the team. I've seen dumber moves, and it's not overall a terrible move, in my opinion, to go ahead and buy up their organization and work in that shop. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Goodyear tire test. Now, there's currently a Goodyear tire test that was going on yesterday and today at Michigan International Raceway. The 3 drivers who are at that Goodyear tire test are Bubba Wallace, of course, represents Toyota, Eric Amarola, we'll talk about later, who represents Ford, and William Byron, who, of course, is representing Chevy. I think it's a lot of it is kind of get some of the bigger track packages and work on some of the tire advantages for how the tire components are going to be. It's interesting, though, they got Bubba Wallace and Eric Amarola at this test, considering that those two had a little bit of beef in the Coke 600, which we're going to talk about here really, really soon. Nonetheless, so it's very, very interesting. We'll see what kind of components come out of it, and we'll see what happens in regards to that. But they're currently testing at Michigan International Raceway. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Worldwide Technology Raceway. As it was reported by Adam Stern that according to Chris Blair, that the Worldwide Technology Raceway is tracking toward a second straight grandstand sellout. One thing about St. Louis fans, and I'm from the St. Louis area, one thing about St. Louis fans is we support our venues. We support our racetracks and we support our venues. And we've been supporting this racetrack for a very, very long time. I, unfortunately, am not going to, as of now, I'm not going to be at the race this weekend, but to see so many people getting the opportunity to go to Worldwide Technology Raceway, I think is really, really awesome. And I think if you're going there for the first time, I think you're really going to enjoy it. They've had some big upgrades at a fan zone, especially infield fan zone, and they're making some huge moves at that racetrack and some huge upgrades, especially as of recently. Nonetheless, so it's really awesome and really exciting to see, and glad to see the Worldwide Technology Raceway is tracking toward a second straight grandstand sellout. It's really awesome stuff, and congratulations to them on doing that. Really awesome stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the Monaco Grand Prix. Now, obviously, on Sunday, we did have the Triple Crown races, the Monaco Grand Prix, the Indy 500, and the Coke 600, though that race did end up getting rained out to Monday. We had the Monaco Grand Prix on Sunday first, and this race was a little more interesting than we initially thought. Now, Max Verstappen was able to win the race. He pretty much dominated. I don't think he gave up the lead at all in this race. But it was pretty much being a dominated day by Max Verstappen. Fernando Alonso trying to be close. But rain would come into play and make the track very, very wet. It got very wet for a little bit, and you had drivers making mistakes, which made the race a little more exciting than I think a lot of people thought it was going to end up being. Like I said, though, Max Verstappen was able to pick up another victory. I think that's his 38th or 39th career Formula One victory, which I think puts him now in the top 5 all-time winners in the F1. So congratulations to Max Verstappen to win the Monaco Grand Prix. It got a little more exciting, but Monaco is not a track that always puts on the greatest racing in the world, so it's not a shock or a surprise to see that the racing was not that good. Not a shock to see that, honestly. Was not surprising to see that the racing was not that good. But nonetheless, huge congratulations to Max Verstappen on winning the Monaco Grand Prix. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about GK Racing. As it was announced on Monday afternoon that GK Racing is going to be joining NASCAR. Now, GK Racing is owned by Cameron, I think, by maybe the Kiss family and also Clay Greenfield's family as well. They're going to be debuting at my hometown track at Worldwide Technology Raceway, and the number is going to be 95. Now, the plan is to run a few select races in 2023, including this weekend at Gateway, which are going to make the field since only 36 cars are entered for the weekend. And also the plan is for them to expand the schedule heading into 2024. Now, you sometimes see a lot of these teams, you say it to believe, but I do trust this team because Clay Greenfield's been in the Truck Series for many, many years, and it's really cool to see a new team joining the Truck Series. I'm wishing this team the best of luck. I think that he could honestly do a decent job this weekend if they've got good schedules. We're not sure what kind of performance they're going to have. I really hope, though, that they do really, really good this weekend. Run up front, and GK Racing can do a very solid and a really, really good job this weekend. The truck race, there's going to be a lot of competitive teams, but maybe we'll see this team perform really, really well this weekend at Gateway. Hopefully, they can be able to do that. And now we're going ahead to move on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Dylan Lupton. As it was announced on Monday before the green flag drop for the Cup race that Dylan Lupton will drive the 44 for Alpha Prime Racing for the upcoming 2 Xfinity Series races. That, of course, being this weekend at Portland and next weekend at Sonoma, which will be the first time the Xfinity Series has raced at Sonoma Raceway. Dylan Lupton has brand basically selectively for the last few years, and he hasn't really performed the greatest, in my honest opinion, and his performances have not been great. He drove for teams like Sam Hunt Racing and Rayon Brothers Racing, and like I said, performances have not been really, really good. But Dylan Lupton, of course, does have a lot of sponsorship and a lot of funding that really helps him get a shot and an opportunity to run these races. So I'm wishing the best of luck. I hope he can do really, really good. To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure if he's going to do absolutely great or fantastic, but nonetheless, this is a good opportunity for Dylan Lupton. Hopefully, he can do a really good job with Alpha Prime Racing this weekend, but I'm not sure if he's going to do good, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Preston Pitts. As it was announced on Tuesday that Preston Pitts will drive the 0-8 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Portland. This will be Preston Pitts' second start of the 2023 NASCAR Xfinity Series season as he drove the 50 car for Pitts Racing at COTA, which I think he finished. I think he had some issues. I'm not entirely sure, but I think he made the field for that event as well. Preston Pitts, of course, is a driver who always tends to run a lot of the road course races and generally is pretty underrated on the road courses. So I could see Preston Pitts having a pretty good run this weekend with SS Greenlight Racing. This is a really good opportunity, though, for him. I think he's going to do very solid. I think he'll do pretty well. Nonetheless, glad to see that he'll be back driving the 08 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Portland. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Gaulding. As it was announced this week on the entry list that Greg Gaulding will drive the 15 for Rickware Racing this weekend at Worldwide Technology Raceway with Community America sponsoring. This will be Greg Gaulding's first Cup Series start, I think about a year or two, and this is a really good opportunity for Greg Gaulding. Greg Gaulding is a driver, tends to get the best out of equipment. I know this year with SS Greenlight Racing has not gone very good for him, but I think this is a really good opportunity for Greg because Rickware Racing, in my opinion, has shown some pretty big signs of improvement at times this year, especially with drivers like Ryan Newman in the car and drivers like Todd Gillen who've shown sometimes some really good performances with this team. So I think Greg Gaulding could have a good run this weekend. I think this is a great opportunity for him and glad to see he'll get the opportunity to drive in the Cup Series race at Gateway this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the Indy 500 TV ratings. Now, the Indy 500 TV ratings came out on Tuesday morning, and they're actually very, very positive. According to Adam Stern, NBC says Indy 500 averaged 4.92 million viewers on NBC and Peacock, which is up 2% from 2022. This is absolutely huge for IndyCar because if you looked at the ratings for IndyCar outside of the Indy 500 this year, the ratings have been down pretty much double-digit numbers, down in the 10 to 15% range, which is not very good. So to see that the Indy 500 TV ratings are actually up a little bit, even if they're only up 2%, the fact that we're seeing the TV ratings up is absolutely really awesome and really great to see because I think it shows that they've been promoting the Indy 500 a lot. And it shows that if IndyCar does promote their events, because that's one of the biggest issues with IndyCar, is the fact they do not promote their events. So I would love for the IndyCar to try to go ahead and say, you know what, we need to start promoting our events so we can get more people to watch these races. Because in my opinion, one of the biggest issues with IndyCar is the fact that they do not promote their races and it hurts the series overall. So I really do hope that they promote these events going forward, but I think this is absolutely huge and absolutely amazing to see that the Indy 500 TV ratings are up. I think it's great for them and really, really great for this guys, in my honest opinion. Really happy to see the Indy 500 ratings up. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chris Wright. As it was announced on Monday that Chris Wright has officially parted ways with Young Motorsports effective immediately. Now, Chris Wright was supposed to run the full season with Young's Motorsports, but after how bad he's been performing with Young's Motorsports this season, how many trucks he's destroyed, I can't blame Young's Motorsports for getting rid of Chris Wright. Look, I know Chris Wright's probably a nice guy, and he may watch the channel. But if you want to ask my opinion, Chris Wright is one of the worst drivers I've ever seen strapped behind the wheel of a race car. He has wrecked every car he gets into. He destroys race cars and does a terrible job. And we go back to Charlotte where Chris Wright just wrecked himself down the straightaway, came up into Tyler Ankrum, literally wrecked himself, and then tried to blame Tyler Ankrum for himself getting wrecked. He said Tyler intentionally wrecks him. Chris Wright basically wrecked himself. And Chris Wright has been absolutely horrendous. I remember back in North Wilkesboro when he couldn't even use brakes. He was like Arca brakes, just ran into the back. I think it was a Dean Thompson, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it's just absolutely a good decision to get rid of him because, like I said, he has not performed very, very good. He's not lived up to the potential that a lot of people had for him. And I think he's just overall done a really, really bad job. So I think this is absolutely the right call from Young's Motorsports. I don't know why they didn't do this sooner. This should have happened a long time ago. But I'm glad at least now, better late than never, to go ahead and get rid of him. Because in my honest opinion, I think he's not done a really good job. I think he struggled, and he deserved, in my opinion, to go ahead and get released from Young's Motorsports. Because he's not lived up to potential and not lived up to potential, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Austin Cindric. Now, Austin Cindric was speaking to media on Saturday, and he says he would love to run the Indy 500 before his career is over. That's one of his bucket list events to do before he gets done with his racing career. He wants to run the Indianapolis 500. Now, Austin, of course, is the son of Tim Cindric, who basically is managing the IndyCar team and is the president of Team Penske as well. Austin, of course, I think is one of the more talented drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series. I do know that Cindric has struggled this year in 2023, but I think a lot of it has been Team Penske. Yes, I know Ryan Blaney just recently won the Coca-Cola 600, but I think a lot of the issues have been the fact that Austin Cindric, he's had a lot of issues and hasn't performed great this season. That being said, Austin Cindric, I feel like would be really fun to have and run the Indy 500 because Austin Cindric has gotten behind the wheel of other different cars, and I think he's done a very, very good job. I'm not saying he's as good as Kyle Larson or other drivers in NASCAR like Kyle Busch, but I most certainly think it would be a really cool opportunity to see him have a shot to run the Indianapolis 500, which I think would be very easy because since his dad is like the president, I think it'd be very easy to have a shot to run the Indy 500. I think there's a chance that it does end up happening, and I think it could end up happening in the foreseeable future. So we'll see what happens, but I think there's a good chance that he will get to run the Indy 500 before his racing career is over. He's not saying next year, 2025, but he's saying like to do it before the end of his racing career. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Nashville Fairgrounds. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the Nashville Fairgrounds, especially as of recently, and there's been some roadblocks that have been going on with the Nashville Fairgrounds. Now, obviously, the mayor, the Metro Council, I think, had approved, or the Fair Board actually approved it, but the Metro Council, there's people from that are trying to stop this from happening. Now, Mayor John Cooper's office is trying to now push the Nashville Fairgrounds proposal forward. According to the proposal, it would be a 30-year deal, and it would not be every single year. It would be every other year. Look, I think John Cooper, who's the mayor of Nashville, really wants to bring Nashville Fairgrounds back to the NASCAR Cup Series or NASCAR altogether. NASCAR has not raced at the Nashville Fairgrounds since, I think, 2000 when the Xfinity Series last raced here. We've seen ARCA race at the Nashville Fairgrounds, which, of course, is owned by NASCAR, but I think that the Nashville Fairgrounds absolutely deserves a shot and an opportunity to come back to the NASCAR schedule because Nashville Fairgrounds, I think, would promote a lot of good racing. And unlike certain tracks like Chicago Street Course that have had issues and people not really excited for that event, I think that this track would be loved by a lot of fans. And there's been more people that want this that are basically are against it. So I really want the Nashville Fairgrounds to come back. I think a lot of his fans really do want it to come back in the future, and I do think the chance of it coming back in the foreseeable future could end up happening, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But I think the Fairgrounds have a shot of coming back in the future, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we do have a couple Kyle Busch stories we're going to talk about in today's episode. The first story revolves around Kyle Busch not being allowed to run all the race that he's allowed to run. And he was speaking to the media this past week, and he says that he misses running as many truck and Cup Series races as he wants to. And he feels like that has affected his performance in NASCAR and is focusing a lot more on running dirt race like Kyle Larson does in order to get a lot better in the NASCAR Cup Series. Now, Kyle Busch, I think he's absolutely right that he probably would love to run more truck and Xfinity races because he also wants to figure out what's going on with Kyle Busch Motorsports. Now, obviously, Kyle Busch is one of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time. But it's no secret that since NASCAR started restricting how many races Cup Series drivers could run, Kyle Busch's performance has absolutely tanked. Now, he has already scored 2 wins in 2023, and he has won a truck race so far. But Kyle Busch has absolutely struggled a little bit more than I think we initially thought over the last years. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he hasn't been able to run the truck or Xfinity Series races that he has been able to do. And I think it's really disappointing to see him get frustrated. But also, Kyle Busch is a big reason why these rules have come into play because Kyle Busch was literally winning every single race that he got into, and he were getting the biggest development. Though I will say a lot of the Xfinity Series drivers really do like when you have those Cup guys in there. So it's a really tough position to be in and a really tough position for NASCAR to be in because I don't think they're ever going to bring it back, to be honest. I don't think NASCAR is just going to go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to get rid of the restrictions. They're not going to get rid of them long term. I do get Kyle Busch's frustration. Believe me, I just don't see them, in my opinion, getting rid of them. I don't think he's ever going to get rid of the restrictions, and I think they will continue having the restrictions long term, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Michael Waltrip and Kenny Wallace. As it was announced during the end of the Coca-Cola 600 that Michael Waltrip and Kenny Wallace will join the Fox Sports booth this weekend at Worldwide Technology Raceway. Now, if you want my honest opinion, I don't think this is the worst move in the world because I actually went back and watched last year's race with these guys in the booth, and honestly, they were not the most horrendous that I have seen them in the booth before. That being said, I would have loved to see other people, like maybe from the St. Louis area or drivers like maybe Rusty Wallace, perhaps, since Rusty is from St. Louis. I would love to see Rusty Wallace get an opportunity to be back at the booth. I think Rusty actually did a very, very good job at Dover. Really surprised me in a big way how good he was at Dover, and I would love to see Rusty Wallace get a shot. But also, Michael Waltrip's in-house, and he did this last year. Like I said, it wasn't the most horrendous broadcasting I had ever seen. That being said, I think a lot of you are going to be listening to MRN broadcasts and PRN, and honestly, I kind of wish I was back at the racetrack this weekend just not to listen to them. But in all seriousness and all honesty, it's cool to see that Kenny Wallace and Michael Waltrip are going to be back in the Cup Series booth. Kenny can be a little bit over the top sometimes. I love Kenny, but he can, like I said, he can be over the top at points. But nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see how they both end up doing in the booth this weekend. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Phoenix Raceway. As it was announced this morning that Phoenix Raceway will once again host the championship race in 2024, which the weekend will go from November 3rd to November 5th in 2024. Look, if you want my honest opinion about Phoenix Raceway being the championship race, I am not a big fan of Phoenix hosting the championship. I get why they're getting the championship again in 2024, and it's because of the fact that NASCAR is waiting until the next contract to make a decision on the future of the racetrack, because the only big reason why they're getting the championship race is because of their facility. Look, one thing about Phoenix Raceway I'll give them is the fact that they do have a really good facility, and their facility looks really, really good. I've never been there, but I've heard from a lot of people that the facility looks really, really good, and when you look at it from TV, it does actually look really, really good. However, I just think when it comes to the racing, it should be about the racing. It shouldn't be about how the track looks, in my opinion. It should be about the racing product. And this is what frustrates me because there is clearly better racing on the track at tracks like Homestead, tracks like Charlotte, tracks like Las Vegas. I think the racing better at those racetracks than racing at Phoenix. I just think that NASCAR, I get where they're going with this. I understand that they're making the championship race again. And it does make sense. Again, I understand why they're doing it. It makes a lot of sense. But at the same token, same time, I really do wish that we could have gone to another racetrack in 2024, just like Homestead Raceway, which is absolutely available for 2024 because the racing with the next-gen car has been really good at Homestead Raceway, especially over the last few years, and I think it would be overall a better racetrack. So it's a little disappointing to see, really frustrating to see nonetheless, but again, I'm not shocked and surprised it's getting the championship race. This is the basically first or second silly season move that happens for the schedule, as we already know at this point that Daytona is going to be back on their weekend once again. So we're starting to get some schedule announcements. We're not too far from that probably getting released, so it probably will be in a couple months, but NASCAR is working toward getting the schedule announced, and it sounds like they're going to start announcing more and more dates as we get closer. But I'm a little disappointed, but again, not really surprised by this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Roger Carruth. As Roger Carruth spoke on the FS1 broadcast for the Xfinity Series, that he says he's a free agent and does not have a right currently for 2024. This is really, really shocking. It's already been announced at this point that he's going to be a free agent in 2024 because obviously there's a lot of talk about the future GMS racing. With Legacy Motor Club switching to Toyota in 2024, and obviously GMS Racing being owned by Maury Gallagher, who is a part owner of the Legacy Motor Club brand, Roger Carruth drives for that team, but he's also a contractual Chevy development driver. So likely Roger was going to have to find a ride regardless, and he may not be the only driver that might be leaving the Chevy camp. Daniel Dye thinks also a Chevy driver, so he might be looking for a new ride in 2024. The big question is going to be, where does Roger go in 2024? Because I think Roger's got a lot of talent. Well, I think he's got a shot at still remaining in the Truck Series next year. You've obviously got, Rev Racing potentially as a possibility. Rev Racing shown shown some pretty good promise, especially this year with Nick Sanchez. Maybe Roger goes to KBM, Kyle Busch Motorsports. They have 2 trucks available. They could get a 3rd truck heading into 2024. And I think Roger would do really, really good at Kyle Busch Motorsports. And what about the Xfinity Series? He could go to Alpha Prime Racing full-time in Xfinity next year. And maybe, just maybe, he goes to Junior Motorsports and drives that 8 car next year. Josh very likely going to Suros Racing in 2024. Roger could have another ride that is available for him to go to. It is going to be interesting to see what happens in regards to Roger Carruth, but it is very disappointing to see that Roger's a free agent. I feel like Roger has been really showing a lot of signs of improvement, especially as of recently, and I don't want to see Roger lose an opportunity to have a shot at racing in NASCAR going forward, but I don't think he's going to have an issue with that. He's got a sponsorship for the Wendell Scott Foundation, which has been really helping him. It's just disappointing to hear that Roger right now is currently a free agent. I think eventually he is going to be able to find a ride. I just don't think he'll be completely out of the water, but it's very interesting to see that Roger right now is a free agent going into 2024. I think they find a ride for him, but it's just interesting, kind of frustrating here that Roger does not have a ride currently for 2024 at this moment. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch once again. As Kyle Busch was speaking to media in the same press conference, and they asked a question about John Hunter Nemechek and what it will take for John Hunter to get back up to the NASCAR Cup Series. Kyle Busch says that John Hunter Nemechek would need $6 million to go cup racing. He says it's not really about a talent game anymore. He says it's about a money game. Now, Kyle Busch obviously did have John Hunter Nemechek on his team when he was still with Toyota. Back in 2022, he had John Hunter Nemechek, and John Hunter, of course, currently drives full-time in the Xfinity Series for Joe Gibbs Racing in the number 20 car. Now, obviously, John Hunter could potentially go cup racing in 2023. A lot of it is going to depend on what happens with 2 drivers at Joe Gibbs Racing, that being Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. Both Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. are currently free agents at the moment, though they are likely potentially going to sign. Denny Hamlin more than likely is going to sign a multi-year contract extension with Joe Gibbs Racing. They're still working on the deal. A lot of it's dependent on FedEx. If you've seen FedEx, they've been dropping a lot of their sponsorship as of recently. They've not really sponsored Denny Hamlin a lot this year, and I think FedEx could potentially leave at the end of 2023, and that would be a huge hit for Denny Hamlin. With 23XI Racing also being a Toyota team, that's likely going to keep Denny Hamlin team. Martin Truex Jr. is the other big question. Martin Truex Jr. right now is under contract only for 2023. His decision is likely going to come at the end of the month. I think there's a chance he could come back in 2024, but there's also a chance, especially of how much older Martin Truex Jr. is, that I could see Martin Truex Jr. retiring at the end of the 2023 season, which would not surprise or shock me. But decisions are not that far down the road from being made, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But I think John Hunter, especially with how well he's been performing, I think he deserves another shot and another opportunity to go back to the Cup Series on a full-time basis. He did drive full-time in Cup for Front Row Motorsports and didn't have a lot of inspiring performances, but I think a lot of it had to do with the team more than anything else, and did make a lot of mistakes, but I think also was a lot of inexperience from John Hunter Nemechek. But I think John Hunter will eventually get back to the Cup Series in the not-so-distant future, which, of course, the money game is a huge thing. It makes that they got, of course, a lot of drivers do have more sponsorship. Drivers like Riley Herbst, Haley Deegan bring sponsorship funding, but they're not going to be a Cup anytime soon, I don't think. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to the silly season, but I hope John Hunter does get a shot to go Cup racing in the future. And now we're going ahead and on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joseph Newgarden. Now, Joseph Newgarden just most recently won the 2023 Indianapolis 500, and Bob Pockrass got to speak to Joseph Newgarden. Now, he asked Joseph Newgarden about maybe running NASCAR races in the future, and Joseph Newgarden said he would love to try to race a stock car in the future, but it would depend on his IndyCar schedule if he was allowed to run in NASCAR. Now, Joseph Newgarden has actually driven a NASCAR car, a NASCAR Cup Series car, I believe, or an Xfinity Series car when Team Penske was in the Xfinity Series. Remember, I think it was back in 2017 or 2018, he actually drove around the layout of the Charlotte Roval. So he has had a little bit of experience driving a stock car. And he actually also, remember, he drove in the SRX last year as well in 1 or 2 races. I think he was at the Nashville Fairgrounds or another race, if I'm not mistaken. So Joseph Newgarden does have a little bit of experience racing in a stock car. The big question is going to be, if he was to race in NASCAR, what team could he drive for? Maybe Team Penske brings back their Xfinity Series program, because they haven't had their Xfinity Series program since 2020 or 2021. So they were rumored to be back for 2022, but they effectively decided not to go ahead and race in 2022. But Joseph Newgarden, it'd be really fun to have him race in NASCAR. He's got an incredible personality, and I think he's one of the most talented drivers in America currently at the moment. And I think it'd be really fun to have him have a shot and an opportunity to go ahead and race in NASCAR. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to that, but I think it'd be really fun for him to have a shot, to have an opportunity to race in NASCAR, and I really do hope that he gets a shot and an opportunity in the foreseeable future to race in NASCAR. Hopefully, he gets that shot and opportunity, but I think he's got a shot at getting an opportunity, to be perfectly honest, but I really do hope that they decide, yep, you know what, we're going to give him an opportunity, we're going to give this guy a shot, and hopefully he gets a shot and an opportunity to race in NASCAR in the foreseeable future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Rockingham Speedway. Now, with the return of the North Wilkesboro Speedway, there's been a lot of talk about the future of other tracks that are kind of involved in the North Carolina area. And one of those tracks is Rockingham Speedway. There's been a lot of talk and conversation that started before we had to return to North Wilkesboro, and is that Rockingham is hoping that they can return to NASCAR in 2024. Now, Rockingham Speedway, they're very, very hopeful, and they feel like they do have a chance of coming back to NASCAR. Now, Rockingham Speedway, a little bit historical context, Rockingham Speedway has not been on the NASCAR schedule in any shape or form since the 2013 season when the Truck Series raced there. But the last time the Cup Series raced at Rockingham Speedway was in 2004, when we saw the really awesome photo finish between Matt Kenseth and Casey Kane, which was an epic and a really, really cool finish there. Rockingham Speedway has a lot of history, and I think it'd be really fun to have Rockingham back. And Rockingham is not completely a short track. It's kind of like an intermediate racetrack. So it definitely would race a little bit more like an intermediate, which I think would help, especially with the next-gen car, because I think the intermediate racing with the next-gen car has been really solid and really, really good. So I think it'd be really cool to see Rockingham back on the schedule. Will he get back on the schedule? I think there definitely is a really, really good chance. It'd be really cool for there to be a potential Carolina swing. You start at Darlington, then you maybe go to North Wilkesboro for the All-Star race, then you maybe go to the Coke 600, and then after that, you go to Rockingham Speedway. The question is, the thing that could hurt the potential of Rockingham coming back in 2024 is if there could be potential possibilities of there being too much in the Carolina area at one time, and there's a lot of tracks that are really close to the Rockingham area. And NASCAR probably like to go to areas that have NASCAR fans that NASCAR doesn't really get out to in a full way. So I think it is going to be nonetheless very interesting to see what NASCAR does decide to do with the future of Rockingham Speedway. Like I said, I think there is a chance that Rockingham is going to come back in the foreseeable future. The question is, will it come back? I don't know at this point. I think the chances are very, very high. I do think you've got a shot of it happening, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But I definitely personally would love to see Rockingham come back on the schedule in the 2024 season. It's been a long time coming. I've been asking for now for about 2 years now, and it'd be really cool to come back in 2024. I think it's 50-50. Obviously, they've been in conversations, and obviously, I think ISC owns Rockingham, but I think it's also owned by independent owners now. I don't think NASCAR owns it really anymore, so I think it's now currently owned by independent owners at this particular moment. So it's going to be very interesting to see nonetheless when it comes to this. If Rockingham does come back, I personally want it back. We'll have to see if NASCAR decides to bring it back. Hopefully, NASCAR makes the right call and right decision to bring it back. So I think it'd be really cool if they brought it back, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Aric Almirola versus Bubba Wallace. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race, the Coco 600 from this past weekend, you saw what happened on pit road during the red flag of the Coco 600. So Aric Almirola and Bubba Wallace got into a little bit of beef, and we saw some pushing and shoving going on. So Aric Almirola apparently went to, I believe, confront Bubba Wallace on pit road, and Aric Almirola basically gave a shove to Bubba Wallace. Now, what's very interesting is that same security guard that was there that basically broke up the Ross Chastain and Noah Gragson fight really quickly was the same guard that was there in between Bubba Wallace and Aric Almirola. Now, Bubba Wallace could have easily gone and shoved Aric Almirola back, and we could have gotten into an all-out brawl. But Bubba Wallace, what we saw is he de-escalated the situation. Now, we got to hear what both drivers ended up saying. Eric Amarola basically told Fox, he said Bubba Wallace was cussing him out, dooring him down the straightaway, not giving him a lot of room, and apparently he gave the finger. Bubba Wallace said that basically Eric Amarola is a two-faced driver and said some not so great things about Eric Amarola as well. Looking at the situation at hand, I looked at the replay stuff and kind of what kind of transpired to it. Eric Amarola was kind of dooring Bubba Wallace down the straightaway a little bit. And that was not Bubba Wallace doing it. Eric Amarola, I feel it kind of got raced, was being raced hard, but being raced fair. And Eric Amarola got really, really frustrated. And Eric Amarola, it's no secret, has had a frustrating 2023 season. He's only had like one top 10 throughout the year, is having one of the worst career seasons of his career. Meanwhile, when you look at Bubba Wallace having one of the best stretches of his NASCAR Cup Series career at this point. While not winning race, he's had 4 top 5s if you technically count the All-Star race, 5 top 10s if you count the All-Star race, and 7 top 12 finishes. And he's only had 1 finish in the last 8 races outside of the top 12. And that was a 28th place finish. And guess what? I think he led the most laps in that race and was battling for the win and going for the win and battling Ryan Blaney for the victory. So Bubba Wallace is outperforming Eric Amarola a big way, and Bubba had a faster car than Eric Amarola. And he also, by the way, almost was one of the part of the reason why we saw the big wreck between Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin. And Bubba Wallace obviously is a very polarizing driver, so people are instantly going to defend Eric Amarola, and they're instantly going to defend Bubba, and they're instantly going to go after Bubba Wallace because Bubba Wallace is a very polarizing driver. But I think in this situation, I think a lot of people should take an effect, and I think that Bubba Wallace kind of could have, instantly got more mad. Like I said, he could have shoved Eric Amarola, and we could have had an overall brawl. But we didn't. I think Bubba Wallace handled the situation very, very well. And you look at his performance, I think he's a much happier driver because his performances have gotten much better, and he's performing. He's in the playoffs right now. He's having a career season. And like I said, Eric Amarola is not performing very, very well, and is having one of the worst seasons of his NASCAR Cup Series career. A lot of that, I think, is to do, in fact, with the fact that quintessentially that SHR, Suros Racing, has not been good outside of Kevin Harvick this season. I mean, he's the only driver in the playoffs. Chase Briscoe's 17th because he's fired off terribly, and Eric Amarola's like 27th or 28th in points, and like 200 points behind Bubba at this point because of how bad Eric Amarola has generally performed. And I get Eric Amarola being frustrated too because I'd be pissed off too if my team was not performing very, very good. But at the same token, at the same time, I was just really surprised to see Eric Amarola get frustrated because you don't normally see Eric Amarola get that upset. He's usually a really cool, calm and mannered guy. So it's really surprising to see him get as frustrated and pissed off as he did. So he had a reason to be frustrated and upset. I was surprised to see him basically give a shove. And I just think maybe he overreacted a little bit. He wasn't having a good day. He wasn't having a good performance at the beginning of the race. He was outside the top 30. So it was just interesting to see. Now, obviously, of course, I mentioned it's the beginning of the episode, but they're both currently testing. I wonder if there will be any more of the swirls between these two going forward in the future. I don't think anything else will come from this. I think it's just a one-off incident. But it's just crazy to see that you see two drivers who usually should respect each other. It's really interesting to see that Eric Amarola got frustrated and upset at Bubba Wallace. I mean, I know Bubba Wallace has definitely been a driver that, has been polarizing, don't get me wrong, but it was just really surprising to see Eric Amarola get as frustrated and mad as he got at Bubba Wallace. Very, very surprising. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we are talking about Chase Elliott. Now, I did a special video talking about the situation, but as expected, Chase Elliott has officially been suspended by NASCAR for the upcoming race at Gateway International Raceway. Now, let's talk about why Chase Elliott has been suspended. So if you watch the Coca-Cola 600, which many of you on the channel probably did watch Coca-Cola 600, you saw what happened coming off of turn number 4. Now, Chase Elliott did get put in the wall by Denny Hamlin as Denny Hamlin got aero tight and Chase Elliott got into the outside wall. Chase Elliott would turn his wheels to the left and intentionally right rear Denny Hamlin down the straightaway, and Denny Hamlin was shaking violently inside the race car. And that shows Chase Elliott basically did not take responsibility for wrecks, saying, oh, dude, these cars, he basically was very political correct. A lot of that really good PR stuff from Hendrick Motorsports. Denny Hamlin went off on his podcast and was really, really mad, and he said that Chase Elliott should sit out for a race for the intentional wreck. Very similar to what happened to Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson last year, where Bubba Wallace got put in the outside wall by Kyle Larson, and then Bubba Wallace right rear Kyle Larson down the straightaway, which is very, very bad because he had the Kurt Busch situation happen where Kurt Busch announced that he retired from full-time racing at the time. This would happen where Bubba Wallace right rear Kyle Larson down the straightaway, and he would get a one-race suspension. So because of this, Chase Elliott has been suspended for the upcoming race at Gateway. So what happens here? Well, there is going to be some driver changes. So Corey LaJoie, who kind of went to defend Chase Elliott on his podcast or on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, Corey LaJoie will drive the 9 car for Hendrick Motorsports at Worldwide Technology Raceway. With Corey driving the 9, who will drive the 7 car? Carson Hocevar, who currently drives full-time in the truck series for Nissan Motorsports in the 42 truck, and also drives 77 car for Spire Motorsports in Xfinity on a part-time basis, will drive the 7 for Spire Motorsports in 2023. Now, first thing, I'll talk about both drivers here in a second, then we'll go back to the Chase Elliott situation a little more. Let's first talk about Corey LaJoie driving the 9 car. This is an absolutely huge opportunity for Corey. Corey LaJoie has been outperforming that Spire equipment this year. And if you look at the points, Corey LaJoie is currently sitting 20th in the points right now, which is really impressive for Spire Motorsports when you consider his teammate Ty Dillon is sitting 33rd or 34th in the points right now. Has been the worst performing full-time driver in 2023. It shows that Corey LaJoie has been absolutely improving. And what's very interesting is that this will be almost the 25-year anniversary of when Randy LaJoie last drove for Hendrick Motorsports. It'll be the first time we've seen a Hendrick driver, a LaJoie family, drive for the Hendrick Motorsports since 1998. But this is a great opportunity for Corey. I think he's going to do really, really well this weekend. I'm not saying he's going to win, but I think Corey LaJoie could definitely put in the fantasy lineup. I think he's got a shot for potential top 10 or even maybe a top 5 this weekend. And I think he's going to do an excellent and a really, really good job this weekend. Let's talk about Carson Hocevar driving for Spire this weekend. This is a very interesting move, but it makes a little bit of sense. Yes, Carson Hocevar has been a driver who historically has right rear drivers down the straightaway. That's happened twice now. Happened to Colby Howard when he intentionally wrecked Colby Howard at IRP, and then also tried to right rear Taylor Gray at Martinsville. But I feel like Carson Hocevar over the last race has been maturing a little bit more. And of course, did pick up his first win at Texas. Yes, he did get into Nick Sanchez, but Nick Sanchez also got loose. So I can't really put the full blame on Carson Hocevar for the incident there. And Carson also, interesting that he kind of broke his leg at this track last year. But that being said, talking about the situation, Carson, I think the goal for him, because this is a great opportunity for him, the goal for Carson is to just complete all the laps and try to finish up front, because I don't think he's going to run as good as Corey has done in that car, but I think he'll absolutely do solid. I think Carson has a shot for a top 25 or maybe even a top 20. That'd be really impressive for a first driver who's never driven the Cup Series before. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Carson. I think he'll do a solid job this weekend. But now let's transition back and talk about the Chase Elliott stuff. Look, Chase Elliott is one of my favorite drivers, probably my second favorite driver to Kyle Larson right now. But I don't care if you're my favorite driver or not. What Chase Elliott did was completely uncalled for and completely unacceptable and extremely dangerous and especially risky. We've had issues with this next-gen car when it comes to safety. And when you look at that in-car camera, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, you saw how badly Denny Hamlin was violently shaking. And that is extremely dangerous and uncalled for by Chase Elliott. And what's so frustrating about this for Chase is the fact that he's a driver who right now can't afford to make stupid moves like this, because Chase Elliott currently sits 81 points below and is likely almost going to fall below 100 points below the cutoff line, because Alex Bowman has been back, and he's probably going to gain a lot more points on that cutoff line as well. And you got to think about the fact that we could get more winners before the end of the season that are below that cutoff line. Guys like Daniel Suarez, who's been strong at road courses. Guys like Ty Gibbs, who've been impressive this season as a rookie. I think Chase Elliott lost sight of the bigger picture. And that's a big problem, because now Chase Elliott could have made it in if he would have stayed on track. He could have made it in on points. I think he's now going to have to win a race to make the playoffs at this particular point. And it's his own damn fault. He made a dumb move. He made a dumb decision and cost himself, his team, a shot at probably making the playoffs, and him a shot at making the playoffs unless he wins, because there's no guarantee Chase Elliott's going to win this year. He's had good speed this year, but he has not had the same speed that Kyle Larson and William Byron have had this season. So it's just really stupid and frustrating to see Chase Elliott loses cool like this, and to see him get mad is uncalled for. And I think the suspension is absolutely fair and shows NASCAR's consistency. Now, I do want to talk about the Chase Elliott fan base for a little bit, because I've seen a lot of Chase Elliott fans saying that Brad Keselowski got into Chase Elliott. No, Chase Elliott turned left where Brad Keselowski got into him. Look, I'm a Chase Elliott fan, but you need some of these Chase Elliott fans have blinders on. They are not seeing a bigger picture, and Chase Elliott should have known better. I get Chase Elliott being frustrated, upset, because I get that he had every right to be upset and frustrated with Denny Hamlin. But like I already said, you do not right rear a driver down the straightaway. If you right rear a driver down the straightaway, you should be suspended. There's been a lot of talk about the playoff waiver being removed. I've seen a lot of even big personalities, big media personalities that are saying that we should get rid of the playoff waivers for drivers who intentionally wreck drivers. It'd be cool if they did that, but they're not going to do that because they've given playoff waivers out to drivers in the past, circa Johnny Sauter back in 2019. And obviously, with a lot of talk about Hendrick Motorsports, if they were going to appeal it, they're not appealing it. They understand, they know it's the right call. So Hendrick Motorsports is not going to appeal the penalties as well. But like I said, Chase Elliott made a dumb move, a dumb mistake. I hope he learns from this. He's still one of my favorite drivers, and I'm going to support him no matter what. But it's just a dumb move on his part, and he cost his team a shot, potentially himself a shot at making the playoffs. This move right here will be it for him. I don't think he makes the playoffs now, to be honest. It's just really frustrating because now he's going to have to win a race, and he put himself in a more difficult position. And I think he made a dumb and stupid mistake on his part and deserves suspension, in my honest opinion. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on so you know if I win a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Links description below over that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think Chase Elliott got the right penalty or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about the Bubba Wallace and Eric Amarola beef on pit road? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have race picks for the Enjoy Illinois 300 at Gateway International Race of the second year at Worldwide Technology Raceway. Then Friday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video on the channel. Then Saturday, we're going to have the Xfinity Series and Truck Series race reviews on the channel. And Sunday, of course, we'll have the Cup Series race review from Worldwide Technology Raceway. And we got more content dropping. We've got some big videos dropping. We're also trying to reach 2,500 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.